Well, hi everybody. Let's take a look now at the next chapter in our new venture creation class. We're going to be taking a look at chapter 4, which is called Your Company. Your Company. And under chapter 4, we have 1, 2, 3. Let's take a look. Uh, looks like looks like we have three major topics to raise. So let's start off with this. What the author's doing now is giving you an idea. Okay, we've talked about your concept, etc. And now let's form a company that we can use to turn our concept into reality. So the first major topic that we have for today is just first step. The first step. He suggests having a strategy and a plan, or a strategic plan. You can call it whatever you want in that. And under that, he has two major topics and a couple of subpoints for you. The first major topic that he has here, the first major point that he has, is just a definition of strategy. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page. He defines strategy basically in one way. I'm going to add a little bit to it as well. His definition is strategy is a plan to achieve a desired outcome. A plan to achieve a desired outcome. So you have something you want to get done. How are we going to do it? Here's our plan. My definition is a little bit different. It's a plan to tell you how you're going to go, where, and when. How you're going to go, where, and when. Notice there are three questions, at least three questions, that you have to ask yourself before you can really get going with this plan. I guess the first question is, where are we going? When are we going? And how are we going to get there? Where are we going? When are we going? And how are we going to get there? This strategic plan should address all three of those and a lot of other things as well. So that's the first major point of the two major points under the first step. The second major point that we have, some key elements that he wants to talk to you about with regard to your strategic plan that you have. And he has 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 points to raise here. Let's start off with the first point. He says that you should know who you are and where you are today. Should know who you are and where you are today. For example, if you're going to be taking a trip someplace and you're going to be buying an airline ticket, and you go online, one of the first things that they ask you is, where are you going to depart from? Where are you today? Where are we going in this? So again, the first question we want to ask ourselves is, who are we and where do we want to go? Where are we today? I'm not where do we want to go, where are we today? The second key element, another question you should be asking yourself, is you should know who you are and where do you want to go. Who you are and where do you want to go. Again, if you're buying that airline ticket online, they usually ask you two questions right off the bat. Where are you now? Where are you going? So in order to put together your strategic plan, you better know both these things. Where am I today? Where do I want to go? And notice that in both these questions, it also asks you about who you are. Who you are, who do you want to be, etc. in the future. What we're talking about there is, think about this. Go back, a number of years ago when you were in, say, high school, and compare yourself to when you were, let's say, a sophomore or junior in high school to when you were a sophomore or junior in college. The odds are you're not exactly the same person. You've developed. We're not talking that there was some sort of major change in you. You went from being a good person to a bad or something like that. But you're not the same person today that you were 4 years ago back when you were in high school. Well, the same goes for when you plan for the future. You have an idea of who you are today, but who do you want to be then? For example, take a look at your career aspirations that you have now. You might have an idea. A lot of students don't, but maybe at this point you have an idea. Okay, what I want to do in the future is I would like to go into accounting, finance, whatever it might be. And you have an idea of what type of career you'd like to get into. Generally speaking, what you'd like to do in whatever job you have. Maybe even thinking about places to work, not only companies, but where. Do I want to be in New York or Los Angeles, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Tampa, wherever it might be. If you think about it, not only as you put together that plan in your mind of where you'd like to be in the future, think about this. You're probably not going to be the same person in the future that you are today. The same way that you changed from high school to today, you're probably going to change from today to 4 or 5 years from now when you have that job that you're planning. So one of the things they're talking about is you should know who you are and where you are today. You should also know who do you want to be and where do you want to be tomorrow. Those are the two key questions you want to ask. Now, with regard to this concept of where do you want to be tomorrow, in the future, where are we going? There are a couple of buzzwords that pop up here. One, this is oftentimes referred to as your vision, your vision. My vision for my future is fill in the blank. Every time that we have an election coming up, you have, everybody and, their brother and sister who's running for election and, telling you this is my vision for the country, for the state, for the city, for whatever they're running for. They're trying to tell you what they see for the future. So as you're looking at yourself, what do I want to be in the future? Who do I want to be? You're talking about your vision. So there's a buzzword for you. And related to that, when we talk about our vision, we're oftentimes talking about our final goal. Where do we want to go? Once this thing is done, 4 or 5 years from now, where do I want to be? What's my goal? And so that's another buzzword for you, goal, and it's very much related to vision because your vision is probably telling you what goal you have, where you want to go, etc. And your textbook, I think, fairly wisely suggests that you use a type of goal. I'll go use a buzzword here. It's just one word, and all the letters in it should be capitalized. It's an acronym, it's an abbreviation. It's called SMART, S-M-A-R-T, SMART. You want a SMART goal. And each of those letters, the S-M-A-R-T, each of those stands for something. The S stands for specific. Your goal should be specific. Don't give me the general BS. Give me an idea specifically. Where do you want to go? Oh, we can change things as things go on, etc. But give me some specifics, not this broad brush stroke stuff, this broad conceptual stuff. Give me something at least somewhat specific. The M in SMART stands for measurable. You should be able to measure as you're going along trying to get to your goal, how close am I? For example, let's go back to you're traveling. And let's say you're flying someplace. I mean, ways to measure it. How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost me? Basically, some way to measure this. The resources going into it, the length of time, the people have to be involved with stuff. Make it measurable. It's fairly easy to do that. The A in SMART, excuse me, stands for achievable. Whatever goal you come up with, make sure it's practical, it's achievable. Now, it might not happen, but don't give me a goal that's never going to happen. Oh, my goal today is I want to start a base, a community on Saturn. I don't know. In the future, people are going to go to Saturn, but I can tell you, I'm never going to go to Saturn. Don't even have a really desire to. But let's assume that was my goal. Are you crazy? I mean, that's not really achievable, particularly for an individual, etc. So you want to make sure that your goal is achievable. Oh, you can stretch the goal. I mean, okay, I need to have a lot of things lined up before I get there, but still, it's achievable. I can get this done. The R in SMART stands for relevant. Relevant. It should be related to, my life, what I want to do in my life, etc. It should be relevant to what's going on today, what's going to be going on in the future. It should be relevant. And then the final letter in SMART, the T, that stands for time or time-based. Put some time limits on it. I want to get this done in 5 years. I want to get it done in 3 years. I want to get it done in 2 weeks, 1 day, whatever. Put some sort of time limit on it. Again, you can make some changes as things go on. But if you say, well, I'm just going to get it done, and you don't put a time limit on it, the odds are you might not do anything because, well, you're not pressured by time. So put a time limit on it. Give yourself another added motivation to get going, get this thing moving. So again, you should have this vision, you should have a goal, and they should be SMART goals that we're talking about. The next point under the key elements, some key elements, I guess this is the third, is now that we have an idea of where we are today, we have an idea of where we want to go in the future, what you want to do is you want to put in stepping stones from here to there, from start to the end, etc. that you have. Some stepping stones. And these stepping stones that we have to get you from one place to the other, they're oftentimes known as objectives. And basically what these objectives are going to do is it's going to be a stepping stone. Okay, I know, for example, I want to become, in the future of my career, I want to become director of marketing at some company. Well, that's not going to happen tomorrow, right? It's not going to happen in my first job. So what are my steps? How am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to major in this. I'm going to do this, that, and the other, get these various degrees, and I'm going to try to get an internship, and then I'm going to, try to get a job with a company here, and then I might try. So what you want to do is you want to put in these stepping stones between where you are and where you want to go. Now, the next step, which I guess would be the fourth step, is now you want to put together a plan and connect those dots. Connect all the stepping stones from the start where I am today to where I want to go, and all the stepping stones in between. Put a plan. You want to connect those dots, and along that line, as you're connecting the dots, connecting, I guess, the stepping stones, connecting the stepping stones that we have here, you want to take a look at what resources and activities are going to be needed to do that. Each of these dots, etc., each of these stepping stones is known as an objective. There's a buzzword for you, objective. Each of the stepping stones is an objective. So what we want to do is we want to have an idea of what resources and activities are going to be needed to move from one stepping stone to the next. When are they going to be needed, etc. As we put together a plan. What are we going to need and when? And some of those things you already have. Great. Some of those things you don't have. And that's fine. Nobody has everything. But if you don't have them, you should also put in this plan, how am I going to get them? When am I going to get them? Etc. So that should be part of the plan as well. When am I going to get them? How am I going to get them? I know I don't have everything, but I'm going to need this, that, and the other. Okay, I'm going to team up with somebody. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get this from somebody else and this from this company or whatever. How am I going to get those resources I don't have? So I have some resources. I'm going to need others. How am I going to get them? When am I going to get them? The next thing you want to do, and this is still part of putting all these dots together into a plan. Next thing you want to do is you want to figure out how you're going to pull all this together. All these resources, all these activities, etc. that you have, how are we going to pull these all together? So if you think about it, all these resources, all these activities that I'm going to need some money, I'm going to need, education and a degree and all this other stuff. And if I'm starting a business, maybe I need a couple financiers and I need somebody who knows marketing and all this other stuff. All these different things that you're going to need, all these different things you're going to pull together. Look at those as individual parts to this system that you're putting together, this business that you're putting together, your life that you're pulling together. You have to pull all the parts together into a system. And the best thing about this, or one of the things you want to really try to do, is you want to try to get those parts to fit. You want to have them fit together. And the better the fit, the better the system, right, that we have. Now, I want you to think about something here, too. Think about, say, for example, I'll go to an example of a baseball team. And we know there are people that sit on the bench, and we have people that have bullpens and everything else like that. But on the field, when you're playing and you're on the field, there's 9 players. So we have 9 parts, right? We need a catcher and a first baseman, and pitcher and shortstop and outfield, or whatever it's going to be. We need 9 players. There are 9 positions that have to be filled. We need 9 players, etc. Well, think about this. As you pull together those players into a system, as you pull them together into your team, the odds are you don't have all the best players. No team really has all the best players. In fact, no business, all the various resources you have, including the people, etc., as you try to pull that into that system, into a team, into an organization, you're going to have some good parts, you're going to have some bad parts, you're going to be missing some parts, etc. So very few, if any, organization or team has all the best parts. So don't worry about it if you don't have all the best parts. What you want to worry about is, can I do the best with the parts that I have? Can I bring those parts together into a working system? Because what brings success is not necessarily having all the best parts, it's having the best system. Now think about this. Although on any given year this might not be right, usually the New York Yankees have, at least arguably, the highest payroll, or one of the highest payrolls in baseball. And if you buy into it, that if you're being paid high, a lot of money, you're probably the best or one of the best. So normally the New York Yankees arguably have almost all the best players on the team. But if you think about it, New York Yankees don't win a whole lot of World Series. They've won quite a few, but there's quite a few times they haven't. Instead, some other team that you never heard of before, well, you heard of, but they're not all that good. They're not the New York Yankees. They don't have all the best players. That team all of a sudden pops out of nowhere and ends up winning. the Tampa Bay team, the Cleveland team, the Baltimore team, or whatever, in any given year ends up winning. And you say, how did you do that? Your players, one-on-one compared to those in New York, you didn't have all the best players. Well, you didn't win the World Series, you didn't come in the top because you had all the best parts. You came in the top because you had the best system. Think about teams that you've played on as a student. There have probably been a number of teams that you've been on where you didn't have all the all-stars on your team, yet your team did great, really good. Well, how did that happen? Well, it wasn't because you had all the best parts. You didn't. It was because you pulled all those parts together, used those parts really well. You pulled them all together into a good system where all the parts fit. So really what you have to look at here as you're pulling together this strategic plan is you have to figure out, what parts you have, all those things that we talked about so far. Where am I going, all those other things. But you have to figure out the parts that you have, and then you have to find a way to pull them all together into a system, a really good system. Usually what finds success isn't having the best parts, it's having the best system. We're still under some key elements here. One last point that we want to take a look at is the end goal that you have, right? The end goal for this business venture you're putting together, if you're an entrepreneur, this business that you have, if it's already established or whatever. And you can think of a lot of really good business goals. Oh, I want to make money, making profit, for a business that's not a nonprofit business. That's certainly a proper goal. It's certainly, if you don't make a profit, you can't stay in business, you can't hire people, etc. So making a profit. Maybe another business goal that you have is increasing your market share, increasing sales. Maybe other goals that you have is, you want to have good customer service, you want to have a quality product, you want to have good employee relations, be a good member of the community, sustainability, and things of that nature. All those things are wonderful. All those things are business goals. From a strategic standpoint, there's really only one goal, and that is you want to position yourself for success. You want to position yourself for success. Now, how do you do that? You want to position yourself to get a competitive advantage. There's a buzzword for you, a competitive advantage. By the way, the word position is kind of a buzzword too, because you want to position yourself in the industry, etc., position yourself in the league, position yourself wherever to get success. And then you want to develop, to get success, how I do that, you have to have competitive advantages. You want to position yourself for success. You want to position yourself so you have at least one, and maybe multiple, competitive advantages. And if you think about it, with regard to competitive advantages, you don't want to just have a competitive advantage just for today. You want to have it through, if it's a team you're playing through the whole season, if it's a business, for years to come, etc., not just for today. So your goal is not just to position yourself for success, position yourself to get a competitive advantage. You want to position yourself to get a sustainable competitive advantage. There's another buzz phrase for you, sustainable. This is something I can hold on to for a period of time, for hopefully a long period of time. I can sustain this that we end up having. Let me give you an example of this. And I've talked about this, I think, in other class sessions that we've had. This example I have for you is it involves Wendy's hamburgers. And let me just take a moment here to put in a slide. Now, if you look at that, it's kind of an odd slide, right? I have the Wendy's logo, got that, because I'm going to be talking about Wendy's. Makes a lot of sense. But I also have in that slide, I have a werewolf, and I also have a silver bullet. What does a werewolf and a silver bullet have to do with Wendy's? And notice the way Wendy's, the logo is up there, kind of like the werewolf's howling at the moon or something like that. How does this all come together? Well, let me give you a quick run-through of the Wendy's case. Back in the 1960s, there were basically four major national hamburger businesses, franchises in the United States. You had McDonald's, you had Burger King, Burger Chef, and Wendy's. Wendy's was the new kid on the block. Wendy's had the smallest of the market shares of the big four. Then it went up, I think, Burger Chef, and then it went to Burger King, and then, of course, the biggest of them all was, and I think still is today, is McDonald's. And all four of them had pretty much locked in their market share. They all had that whatever percentage it was. Again, McDonald's the biggest, and maybe Burger King and Burger Chef, and then way at the bottom was Wendy's. And they could come out on a given day. Here's a special or a sale or something like that. It might adjust the market just a little bit for a day or two, but no, not much. It wasn't a big deal. Then Wendy's ended up doing something that did change that. Wendy's decided to put in drive-through windows in virtually all of its restaurants across the United States. Now, up until that time, most restaurants, in fact, I don't think any, at least none of the big chains, had drive-through windows. So to get their product, let's say you're taking your family out for a relaxing family dinner, you'd have to get everybody, bundle everybody up, get them into a car, etc. You, your spouse, and a couple of kids, in the back. Then you'd have to drive to McDonald's or wherever you were going, and then you'd have to find a parking spot and get the kids and everybody out and get them through the parking lot and hope nobody gets run over because the kids are running everywhere. And then you go into the restaurant, and they really at that time the restaurants didn't really have any place to sit down. Going to restaurants today, there's plenty of places to sit down. You basically walked in, there's pretty much a counter. There would be a couple of small chairs or whatever to sit in. And it'd be crowded, and everybody's kind of pushing to get up to the front. And when you would do so, when you finally get up to the front, their menu wasn't big like today. It was basically, it had a hamburger, a cheeseburger, French fries, and some sort of drink. That was pretty much the menu that you had. But even with just a few choices, you've got a bunch of kids there, you've got your spouse, you're going back and forth. What do you want? Bobby wants this, Sally wants that, and then Sally hears what Bobby wants, Bobby hears, and they change, etc. They hear other kids, etc. Finally, you order this stuff, you get whatever the final decision is. Now you got to carry it all out to the car, right? So it's all in bags and stuff, and you and your spouse are trying to do that and take the kids in tow and not get them, run over by all the cars in the parking lot. You finally get back to the car, and that's where you would eat. And you'd be in the front seat with your spouse, etc., and the kids would be in the back or whatever, and you start passing out the French fries and the drinks and the hamburgers or cheeseburgers or whatever. And kids, as soon as you started handing this stuff to them, they're spilling this and this is dripping, and there's a fight and someone's throwing French fries at somebody else or whatever. Finally, after all this is done and everything's finally eaten, etc., you grabbed all the paper that was left over, you put it in the bag that they gave to you as you left the place, and as you drove out, there was a place where some sort of waste can or something, and you just throw it in there and off you go home from this relaxing family dinner. Well, it wasn't very relaxing. So Wendy said, hey, listen, let's put in drive-through windows. That way you can just drive by. We can, basically, hand you the stuff, or throw it out the window too as you're driving by. You can get it, you could go home, and then you could feed the kids there, etc. It was much easier. So they're much more customer-friendly type of operation. Well, when they did this and became the first major chain to have drive-through windows, you can imagine what happened to their market share. The other three main burger joints or whatever, you still have to drag your kids in and out of the place. Here you can get it and drive home, right, with a drive-through window. So what you saw is a lot of people who oftentimes would have gone to a Burger King, Burger Chef, or McDonald's are now going to Wendy's because it was just so much easier to get that stuff. So what we saw initially is we saw Wendy's ends up, because of the drive-through window, it gets a competitive advantage, and it actually starts moving up in its market share. It becomes more successful in whatever that we have. So what we have there first is we have a strategy to help us get a competitive advantage. Again, competitive advantage is a big buzz phrase here. Well, what was the strategy? Well, we did something different. We're unique. The others don't have this drive-through. We do. We're the only ones, at least at the time, in the major joints. So what we saw is Wendy's, by following a strategy known as differentiation or product differentiation, gets us competitive advantage. More people now are going to Wendy's because it's easier. It's much more customer friendly. So what we see, though, is, of course, the other top three, Burger King, Burger Chef, and McDonald's. You think they just sit back and say, oh, well, see, later customers, we don't need you? Well, of course not. What do you think they did? Well, if you were the head of Burger King or Burger Chef or McDonald's, what would you do? Well, you'd go put it in drive-through windows in your businesses as well, in your restaurants, and that's exactly what they did. So what they did is they took what Wendy's had, the drive-through concept, and they copied it. Now, what do you think happened after they copied it? It took them a while, right? They have restaurants all over the coast, and from coast to coast, and it took them a while to get them all in. But once all their drive-throughs are in, etc., what do you think ended up happening to Wendy's? Do you think they continue to have that competitive advantage? Everybody's still going to Wendy's because of it? Heck no, everybody's now going back to McDonald's and Burger Chef and Burger King, etc., because they have drive-thrus too. So Wendy's competitive advantage, which went way up, all of a sudden kind of drops. Their market share kind of goes back, not quite to where it was before. It's still a little higher, but it's still much less than it had been when they were the only one doing it. So what you see is one of the ways to kill a competitive advantage is what we saw with regard to what McDonald's and Burger King and Burger Chef did. They copied the uniqueness. They copied that different product that Wendy's had. And then when they copied it, Wendy's competitive advantage, which they had hoped to have, literally forever, they had hoped to sustain it, it was no longer sustainable. The sustainability died. The competitive advantage to a degree died. Why? Because someone copied it. So what you see there on my slide that I have, that I showed earlier, the werewolf and the bullet, I want you to think about this. If you've ever watched a movie or read a book or seen a TV show or whatever with werewolves in it, right? Folklore said there was only one way to kill a werewolf, and that was to shoot it with a silver bullet, to use a silver bullet. That was the only way to kill a werewolf. If I asked you, what is the silver bullet for a competitive advantage, particularly a sustainable competitive advantage, and particularly one that's based on differentiation, what would the answer be? What's the only way to kill that competitive advantage, or the main way to kill that competitive advantage, the main way to kill a werewolf? What's the silver bullet to kill a competitive advantage? You kill a werewolf with a silver bullet. How can I kill a competitive advantage or the sustainability of it? Allow someone to copy. When other people copy, that oftentimes can destroy your competitive advantage, particularly, again, if you're using the strategy of differentiation. Differentiation is a wonderful strategy to use. It can lead to some great success. But again, if others can copy you, that competitive advantage that you had, at least initially, is very hard to sustain. You might lose it. It might die. Why? Because someone copied. What's the silver bullet to a competitive advantage or the sustainability thereof? The silver bullet is to allow somebody to copy. Are there ways to stop people from copying? Well, there are some. They don't cover everything. You can have trademarks and copyrights and patents. Those certainly help. You can have trade secret agreements and things like that. But nonetheless, if people copy you, you can be in a lot of trouble. You might lose the sustainability anyway. You might lose your competitive advantage. So that finished up the key elements. We certainly suggest that you have a strategy, know where you are, where you want to go. Put in some stepping stones to get there, tie them all together. With the strategic plan. You might think about, you're trying to position yourself for success. One of the ways you might do that to get a competitive advantage is to be different, use that differentiation strategy. It's a great idea, but you want to be careful. One of the problems of a differentiation strategy is if somebody can copy you, pretty easily and not expensively, if someone can copy you, then you might find that your werewolf, the silver bullet that killed off your sustainability, was someone copied you. Well, let's go to the second major topic. That finishes up the first. That finishes up the first step, the strategic plan. What's the next step? Okay, I've got this plan in place. What's the next step? So what else do I end up having to do? Well, one of the first suggestions that your author has is get a name for your business now, right? You have this idea, okay, I've got I know where I am, know where I want to go, have a plan to get there, etc. Well, now what I have to do is I form this business. Probably a good idea to get a name. And your author has a couple of thoughts and suggestions on the name. First, they suggest that you get a sticky name, one that sticks with people, one that people remember. When they go out to buy a hamburger, I'll remember Wendy's or whatever. Some name that's sticky. Your author suggests it should be unique and memorable and stand out in a positive way. It should be unique and memorable and stand out. Keep in mind, if we're unique, we're probably following, at least with the name, a differentiation strategy, right? We're trying to be different. We have something unique. We don't want the same name as everybody else. Ours is going to be unique. It's going to be different. So you want to make sure, whatever name you come up with, that no one else is using it, So there's a couple of things that your textbook mentions that you can do with regard to it. Some really good ideas. First off, you want to check at the federal government to see if anybody else has used that name and filed that name to get a trademark, federal trademark. If you get a federal trademark for a name, the theory is nobody else can use it. At least nobody else can use it that's in the same business as you. If they're in another business and people can't confuse the products, maybe you're okay. For example, the name Apple, right? You have Apple computers, but you also have Apple Records. And that was the Beatles record label. Well, the Beatles record label was out there, and they had trademarked Apple. And then along comes a computer company and says, "Oh, great, we're going to use the name Apple." Well, initially the Beatles said, "No, you can't. We've trademarked it." But the people at the Trademark Bureau said, "No, it's too good, too different. Music and computers. There's no one's going to confuse those two. So Apple, you can use it." Of course, then Apple later kind of screwed that up a little bit by developing a great product. They brought out all the iTunes and iPads and all of the other stuff that they had music on it. So then all of a sudden there was a problem, and the Beatles sued them again, and they ended up settling, etc. And I won't get into how they settled and what they did, but the Beatles said, "Yeah, you can use the name Apple, but you can't say the word Apple when you're selling music. You can just show your Apple logo or something." So it was kind of a little craziness. But generally speaking, if somebody has a federal trademark on a name, you can't use it, again, unless you're in some other business, and I'd be careful. I still wouldn't use it. In addition, each state usually has a special trademark registration. It will only protect you within the state, whereas the federal protects you across the nation. Within the state, you can protect yourself. So another place you want to check is not only at the federal level, go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office website, which would be www.uspto.gov, www.uspto.gov. You can go there and check trademarks, but not only should you check it at the federal level, you probably want to check it at each state that you're going to be doing business in. So for example, I'm in Pennsylvania, so if I'm opening up a business and I'm going to go check at the federal level, I probably should check the state of Pennsylvania. There's places where you register names, etc. Most states have something like a corporation bureau or something like that where you have to register these, and you can usually go online and check and see does anybody else have it. So again, if anybody else has it, if they've trademarked it, I wouldn't use it. You probably can't. There might be some exceptions like Apple Music and Apple Computers or something like that. I still would suggest that you don't use somebody else's name. Well, after you've checked at the federal level and you've checked at the state level, there's at least one more place you should check. There's probably others as well. If you hire an attorney to do this, they'll probably check other places. But one last place I would check, I would go to a couple of search engines. I'd go to Google and Yahoo and a couple of others, DuckDuckGo or whatever they're called. And I would take the name that I have chosen, and assuming it passed all the trademark tests or whatever, I would then just type it into a Google search and see, does anybody else have this name? Because you can have a name and not register it for trademark protection. So you might say, well, listen, if I don't have a trademark, if someone doesn't have a trademark on this, can I still use it? Maybe. There's some special protections that you might have even without a trademark, called common law protections. But even beyond that, I would highly recommend not using a name that anybody else is using. For example, and assume even if they haven't registered trademark and don't have any type of common law rights to it, etc. I one time had a client that came to me, and they came to me, of course, after the problem arose as opposed to before they got into it. And they took a name that some other company, on the other side of the United States was using, and the other company was doing something completely different than what they were doing. They were doing computer software, and the other company was, I don't know, fixing cars or something like that. They took the same name. And they thought, well, this is fine. They don't have a trademark. We're great. Well, you don't want to do that, because that other company that you're using their name, assuming they don't have a legal right to it, they haven't filed a trademark, and they don't have some sort of common law right to it, they probably have established a reputation. And if you take their name, there's a chance their reputation is going to come over with you. So this client that we had, they had taken the name of somebody, as I say, in this couple, half a country away or whatever, doing something different. Well, it turned out that there were a lot of customers of that company that thought they were doing horrible things, that they were unethical, etc. So there were all these complaints that were filed with government agencies on them. There were a couple of lawsuits that had been filed. The reviews that you would get, by going to Yelp and other things like that were absolutely horrible. So anyway, my clients start off, they start using the name, and before you know it, they start getting people who are chasing the other company, chasing them. They thought they were the same company. Well, they weren't. But they ended up spending a ton of money trying to tell people, no, 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 we're not the company from Arkansas or whatever, we're the company from Connecticut. But you know how much time and money and expense and stress they went through trying to do that? And that's still ongoing. So again, I would recommend not only doing the federal trademark search and the state trademark search, but also suggest going to a couple, not just one, but a couple search engines and seeing is anybody else using it. If you get wind that anybody else is using it, I wouldn't use it. So those are just some thoughts there. Just some more thoughts that your author has about the name. Make sure that the name you choose isn't offensive. And in this day and age, sadly, people get offended so easily about so many different things. So you really have to do some analysis. The words I'm using, is somebody going to be offended by this? And not only should you worry about the words themselves, but what about an acronym, an abbreviation of this? You might not even think about using the acronym, but for example, you have companies like the National Broadcasting Corporation is referred to as NBC. It's just an acronym. Major League Baseball is known as MLB. Again, it's an acronym. M for major, L for league, and B for baseball. NFL, National Football League. You got the point here. You want to be careful because even if you don't use the acronym, let's face it, people like to make things simple. Your customers and other people might make an acronym out of it too. Now think about this. Let's say an example I have for you. Let's say a couple of ministers or pastors, from a church, several churches get together and say, listen, let's form an organization, and we're going to be the Pious Order of Pastors. The Pious Order of Pastors. What's the acronym for that? What are you going to be able to do with that? So you want to be careful with regard to that because, if you take, the P and the O and the O and the P, you end up coming up with something that's offensive. Some other thoughts here, too, about the name. You want to make sure that it doesn't limit you in the future. For example, if I start a company and I started in Dayton, Ohio, and I call it the Dayton Pizza Shop or something, well, then in the future, what do I do if I start to expand to Columbus or Indiana or Chicago or something like that? It's still called Dayton. People are going to wonder. And also, what about the name of the product? What if all of a sudden I go from being a pizza shop and all of a sudden I'm doing something else? I'm selling hamburgers, I'm selling ice cream or something. So be careful that the name you choose now doesn't limit you in the future. A couple of other thoughts. Make sure that the name is practical. That's not too long. I've heard names of companies and organizations that's so long, it's crazy. And that's, again, why you use acronyms to make abbreviations. And also, if you do that and you end up getting a website, you can imagine how long the URL is going to be, the link's going to be for that. So be careful it's practical. And think about this, too. The name that you choose for your business, over time, is going to become a brand name. Hopefully, you're going to develop brand recognition for it. So this name is really important. So let's go to the next point that we have here. And the next point is you want to decide on a legal structure for your business. Now, if you've had a course in business law, you have covered all the different types of legal structures for business organizations, and you probably have learned the ins and the outs of them. All I'm going to do here is just kind of briefly go over some of them, basically list them by name, make a couple of comments, hardly any. But this is to get you started. However, as I say, you want to find out more before you make a decision. Don't base it on what I'm saying here. You want to get some additional details about each of these. And again, a good business law course will be able to provide them for you. But let's take a look at deciding on the legal structure. Basically, there are three major types of legal structures for for-profit businesses. Not talking about nonprofits or whatever, but for-profit businesses. And the latter two of them have multiple types. So let's take a look at. The first is a sole proprietorship. The sole proprietorship. The name sole meaning one, proprietorship meaning owner, it's one owner. Sole proprietorship, one owner. And by far, most of the businesses in the United States today are sole proprietorships. And they're sole proprietorships not because this is a smart choice. There probably are some better choices. You'll find so many sole proprietorships because it's the easiest choice. This type of business has the fewest governmental forms compared to the others. But there's some real downsides to it, including the fact that the owner has unlimited personal liability for the debts and the liabilities of the business. Unlimited personal liability for the debts and the liabilities of the business. For example, if I go out and I start a coffee shop someplace and I sell someone a cup of coffee and I sell it at a temperature, we're talking hot coffee, and I sell it at a temperature that most marketing studies say people want their coffee at. Strangely, most studies say they want the coffee at 170 degrees Fahrenheit. To me, that's too hot. I mean, human body temperature is 98.6, so 170 is pretty hot. But I know people like it that hot, and also if you get that hot, it takes longer for it to cool down, and if you want hot coffee, you probably don't want cold coffee, right? So I guess I can understand to some degree. The trouble is 170 degrees of any type of fluid will scald human skin, will scald it. And you probably heard of that rather famous or infamous McDonald's case about the lady who drove through a McDonald's, ordered some coffee, and spilled it on her. Let's say that happened to me. I opened up a coffee shop, etc., and somebody buys coffee, and they've been in my coffee shop a lot. They know it's a hot coffee, 170 degrees. They might not know the exact number, but they know it's really hot. And it's the same temperature as served at all the other coffee shops, and they've been there too, and they know it's hot. But nonetheless, they end up, buying it, and they spill it on themselves, etc., and get, scalded skin and skin grafts and other things like that. So they turn around and they sue me. Well, let me say that let's say I sold them a cup of coffee for $1. Well, they're going to turn around and sue me for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars. So where's the money going to come from, assuming I lose the lawsuit? Well, I might have some insurance, but I don't know if I have enough insurance to cover it all, particularly if I'm a small business. And if I'm a sole proprietor, I probably did that because I'm trying to save money. So I probably don't have either any insurance, which I should have some, or I might not have much insurance. So, insurance, let's say they sue me and they get $1 million. And let's say I have insurance for $500,000. Okay, that's covered by the insurance, hopefully. Where's the rest of the money coming from? Well, you can take all the assets of my business, and let's say, I'm running the coffee shop, etc. So probably don't have much. Maybe the total assets of my business maybe another $100,000. So they get that. So now where does the other $400,000 come from? It comes from my house and my car and my savings account. They get my dog and my clothes and everything else like that. So when we talk about sole proprietorship, one of the biggest problems we have is a sole proprietor has unlimited personal liability for the debts and the liabilities of business. That's not a good thing. Because again, if you think about it, everybody's suing everybody. You can't but help turn on the TV and see some attorney saying, hey, been injured, come see me, we'll sue for free. Well, if I have been injured, why not go there? I mean, worst comes to worst, I'm not going to have to pay legal fees, at least from what they're saying. So let's just take a shot. It's better than going to the lottery. At least in the lottery, you have to pay for the ticket. Here, I don't even have to pay. So again, I'm not so sure sole proprietorship's a good idea. There's some other downsides and upsides to it, but I'd be very careful about it. The second type of legal structure for a business organization are partnerships. And there's at least 5 different types of partnerships, and they can get really confusing. Let me just tell you what the 5 are, and then I'll say just a few words about them. You have what's called a general partnership. Sometimes it's just called a partnership, and you just assume the word is general. The type is general. So you have a general partnership. You have what's called a limited partnership. You have something called a joint venture or a joint ventureship. You have something called an LLP, a limited liability partnership. Now, didn't we just say something earlier about limited partnership? Doesn't it start getting confusing? And then the last type of partnership is called an LLC, limited liability company. Be careful. A lot of people want to say LLC stands for limited liability corporation. It's not a corporation. An LLC is a partnership. It has corporate characteristics, but it's still a partnership. Just a few general words about some of these. General partnership, you have 2 or more co-owners who share in the management of the business. Big downside of that, the partners have unlimited personal liability for the debts and liabilities of the business. Unlimited personal liability for debts and liability of business. So $1 cup of coffee, and next thing you know, you've lost your house. And worse than a sole proprietor, in a general partnership, each partner is liable for the other. So I might have a rule: I'm not selling coffee hot. I'll sell it at 100 degrees or something, which won't scald human skin. But my partner might say, "The heck with that! I'm selling it for 170." So my partner sells it for 170. We get sued, etc. You say, "Well, you made the decision. You should pay for it." Well, that's not what the law says. The law says both my partner and I are liable for it, so they can come after me if they want to. They don't have to go after my partner, even though my partner was the one who made the decision. So a general partnership can have a tremendous amount of liability, because you're not just liable for your debts, you're liable for the problems caused by your partner. It's called joint and several liability, if you've ever heard of that buzz phrase. The next type of partnership is a joint venture, joint ventureship. And this is where some people or some organizations come together to do one project or set of projects. And once that's done, it's over. You break it up. Everybody goes in their own separate way. We divide up the money. Hey, see you later. It was great and lots of fun, etc. And you can structure a joint venture or joint ventureship either as a general partnership, or you can structure it as something we're going to talk about in a moment, a limited partnership. So let's now go to the next of those partnerships, limited partnership. What the heck's this? A limited partnership means that one of the partners, you can have multiple partners, but one of the partners, maybe more, are partners that have what is called unlimited personal liability for the debts and the liabilities of the business. Unlimited personal liability for debts and liabilities of business. So if somebody sues the company for the $1 million and you pay it off, and there's still $400,000 in that example I gave you before, where are they going to get it from? Well, they're not getting it from me, because if I'm a limited partner, that means my liability is limited to whatever my investment was in the business. Take the business, it's all yours. Leave my house and my car, my puppy dog, etc. alone. You can't come after us. Now, in a limited partnership, at least one of the partners has to be a general partner with all that unlimited personal liability stuff. But there's some ways around that, and I won't get into it in great depth, but at least one of them has to be. But the others have this limited personal liability, which is actually a pretty good thing. It's kind of a shield to kind of protect your personal assets. The next is a limited liability partnership. Doesn't it sound like a limited partnership that we just talked about? It's not. It's entirely different. Most limited partnerships, it seems, are formed for real estate development and things of that nature. With regard to limited liability partnerships, we see quite a lot of accounting firms and accountants joining this type of thing. Generally speaking, with some exceptions, all the owners, LLP and a limited liability partnership, have limited personal liability. We don't have to have a general partner, etc. And all the owners have limited personal liability for the debts and liabilities of business. But there's some restrictions, some narrowness on that protection. There's some things that escape, and you have an umbrella to protect yourself from all the liability. Well, there's a little hole in a LLP. There's still some things that can come after you, but for the most part, you're protected. And the final of these partnerships is an LLC, limited liability company. And again, keep in mind, a lot of people think LLC means limited liability corporation. It's not a corporation. It's a partnership. So it's an LLC is a limited liability company, not a limited liability corporation. LLCs are one of the trendy types of businesses to form today. You'll find quite a few new small businesses go this route. Why? Well, the members of a limited liability company, of an LLC, generally also have generally have limited personal liability for the debts and liabilities of the business. Limited personal liability. Once again, you sue me, etc., sue the company, etc., and there's that, sue for $1 million, and I get, some things, with insurance and other things, you get to take the company. Well, what am I going to do with the other $400,000 that's still owed? Oh, I'm going to go after Fogarty personally. Not if I have an LLC. If I've done all the right things, etc., the LLC, once again, is going to protect my personal assets from all these creditors coming after the company, the people that sued. Now, just like an LLP, it's not a full umbrella. There's a little bit of a hole, probably a little bit less of a hole in an LLP, but there's a little bit of a hole. There's still some potential for unlimited personal liability, but it's usually not very big. That's one of the reasons LLCs are so popular. There's some paperwork, but not a tremendous amount of paperwork, more so than the sole proprietorship. But because it's not too difficult to form, because it does shield to a great degree your personal assets, again, there are some exceptions, a lot of people are doing the LLC route. The last of the three types of businesses are corporations. And again, I'm not talking about nonprofits. I'm just talking about for-profits. And with regard to for-profit corporations, there are two types of them. You have what are called C corporations, and that's just the letter C. And then you have what are called S corporations, and that's the letter S. All corporations that are formed, all for-profit corporations that are formed, initially start out as a C corporation. Within, usually, I think it's something like 3 months, 75 days, 90 days, something like that, after you form it. If you want, you can convert your C to an S corporation. And I'll tell you why and you might want to do that. A C corporation, the owners of it, they're known as shareholders. Anytime you buy a corporation, I got shares, right? I got shares of stock or whatever. Generally speaking, and again, there's always exceptions to all these things, but generally speaking, owners of a corporation, shareholders, have limited personal liability for the debts and liabilities of the business. Limited. So again, you sue, you're not going to get my Cocker Spaniel, you're not going to get my set of sneakers upstairs. Or, my personal assets generally are covered. Again, there's some exceptions, they're generally covered. And another neat thing about a corporation, and a C corporation as well, is if I pass away, my stock is just, goes through my will, or it's inherited by, my spouse, my kids, whoever my beneficiaries are. If I have a sole proprietorship, general partnership, etc., when I pass away, in many cases, my business dies, and someone has to restart it. And it's usually not difficult to restart it, but you got to go through all the steps. Whereas if I have a corporation and I pass away, you get the stock, we don't have to restart the corporation. So there's a benefit there as well. But I mentioned there's this other type of corporation, not just a C, there's this S corporation. What is this? Well, C corporations have a tax problem, so to speak. C corporations are considered to be a new entity, separate and distinct from its owners. Owners own stock, but the corporation is a separate entity. It's another person under the law. Well, one of the tax problems, one of many tax problems, I won't get into tax issues or any of these, but one of the tax problems I'll mention to you is, generally speaking then, if you own a C corporation, all of the profits that you make, you go through, you get some revenue and you get some expenses, and the difference between revenue and expenses, there's my profit. All the profits are taxed by two at two levels. The corporation, which makes the process, again, keep in mind that's a person separate from you, the owner. Corporation has to pay corporate income tax. Oh, there you go. You made a profit, right? Okay, makes sense. But then when the corporation goes and sends that money to you, you take a stock dividend, etc., for example, or maybe they pay it to you in salary or something like that. When it transfers some money from that person, to you, another person, that's taxable. So now when you get it, now you've got to pay personal income tax on it. So now we got a big problem. By the time it goes into my pocket, we've paid tax on it twice. We paid it at the corporate level, and then we paid it at the personal level. That can be expensive, right? Who wants to pay taxes once, much less twice? So a new entity was formed back in the 70s. President Nixon was in office at the time. And this entity is for small business corporations, small businesses, not the U.S. Steel's corporation, but small ones, where there's, just a couple of owners. I think recently it was changed. It might be, 75 owners or something. One time it was lower, etc. But there's a limited number of owners. In an S corporation, there is no corporate income tax. Well, you fill out forms and send that stuff in, but there's no corporate income tax. So let's say I make $100, for a profit in my corporation. There's no corporate income tax, and then the corporation transfers it to me. Let's say it gives me a dividend. So I get a dividend of $100. I have to pay personal income tax on it, but I'm only paying tax once on personal income. I don't have to have the corporate income tax as well. So we don't have this thing called double income taxation with an S corporation. And again, the S corporation, there's some restrictions on it, but one of the key ones, it's got to be a small business corporation. And you can take a look at what that means or whatever. So there's a benefit. Usually the taxes can be a little bit less for an owner of an S corp than the owner of a C corp. And there's ways to play games with taxes, you know that. But generally speaking, an S corp might be the way to go for most small businesses, etc. If you don't go LLC route, you might want to go the S corporation route. The problem with corporations, as opposed to, say, the LLC, there tends to be more paperwork, more files, things have to be filed, etc., like that. So the paperwork tends to be a little bit higher, which is one of the reasons people went from small businesses. Used to see a lot of S corporations formed to protect myself, because an S corporation, like a C corporation, has that corporate umbrella, to kind of protect you from personal liabilities, etc. But what we end up seeing here is both the S and C corporation have that protection. So initially we saw a lot of small businesses forming S corps, but now, because it tends to be a little bit easier to form an LLC, that's why we tend to see the trend going towards LLCs as opposed to S corps. People still do S corps, and there's pros and cons of both LLCs, etc. But we have that S corp, which a lot of small businesses still today do. But because there's additional paperwork, you oftentimes see them going to the LLC route. Well, those are the different types of legal structures. You got to pick one, and what you're going to do to consider it. Do you want limited legal liability or unlimited legal liability? Personal liability. So that's certainly an issue. Do you want to lose your Cocker Spaniel and your sneakers, etc.? Another thing you want to consider is how easy is it? There's a lot of forms, not a lot of forms. Corporations tend to have the most, sole proprietor the least, and partnerships are kind of in between or whatever. Another is the cost and the money, and the taxes associated with it. Do I have to hire an attorney to do this? Can I do it, etc.? What about, do I need an accountant? Can I do it? Can someone else do it, etc.? What are the taxes, etc.? So those are some of the considerations you have in choosing your legal structure. The next issue that you have, now that you figured out, I want an S corporation, I want an LLC, or whatever it might be. The next is you have to decide on which state you want to legally base your legal structure. Now, if you're a sole proprietorship or a corporation, not counting an LLC or LLP, you're probably going to form it in your own state. Hey, I'm located in Pennsylvania, so I'm forming my sole proprietorship here. With regard to particularly corporations, maybe a little bit with LLCs, Um, we see that a number of people have decided, hey, I might be located in Ohio, but I'm going to form my corporation in Delaware. I heard that Delaware has no corporate income tax. So even if I have a C corporation, I'm in better shape there because there's no corporate income tax. Be careful about that. You still might want to form your corporation or your LLC in the state where you're located, as opposed to in Delaware or some other state. Because even if you form your corporation, let's say I'm located in Kentucky, even if I form my corporation in Delaware, I don't want to pay the corporate income tax of Kentucky, and Delaware doesn't have corporate income tax. The trouble is, in your state, now you're located in Kentucky, right? Because you formed your corporation in Delaware, you're considered to be a foreign corporation. A foreign corporation. It sounds like, okay, I'm located in Japan, right? No, I'm in Kentucky. That's foreign. Yeah, you're a foreign corporation. And foreign corporations tend to have to pay the income taxes of the state they're located in. And then there's some additional fees that they might have to pay. So if you end up saying, I'm going to form in Louisiana, but I'm going to be located in Louisiana, but I'm going to form in Delaware because there's no corporate income tax, you really want to have an attorney or accountant look at this, because you might be considered to be a foreign corporation in Louisiana. You might end up having to pay Louisiana corporate income tax, even though Delaware doesn't have one. Now you got to pay one in Louisiana, and there might be some other fees and other paperwork that you've got to do. So be careful about that. Generally speaking, I see, unless really small businesses, unless this thing's really going to grow and go public or whatever, I see quite a lot of small businesses just forming, in the state where they're located. If I'm located in Oklahoma, by goodness, I'm going to incorporate in Oklahoma. I'm not going to incorporate in Delaware. You might want to consider it, but again, talk to an attorney or accountant. And then the last of the points under the second major topic about next, what am I going to do next, is now what you want to do is you want to register with the state, with the federal government, with your local governments. There's probably all sorts of permits and licenses you have to get. And by goodness, if you don't get them, etc., you're in all sorts of trouble. And I want to particularly say on this, you want to take a look at the local registrations, because what you end up doing when you go and you do this yourself, you oftentimes can find many of the federal regulations and permits you need. You find many of the state regulations and permits you need. You might not have the slightest idea that in your city, in your township, in your burg, your borough, whatever, village, whatever it's called, there are requirements too. And if you don't fill out the forms and get the permits and register with the locality, they're the ones who are going to come after you. You did it for the feds, you did it for the federal government, I should be great, right? No, the local government, the village people are going to be coming after you, the township, the city, or whatever. So be very careful. Again, you need the permits and licenses, not just at the federal level, not just at the state level, but check your locality as well. You might even have school district taxes to pay, etc. So you just want to check with that. Well, that finishes up the second major topic, other considerations, etc. Well, the third topic, I guess the second was, what next? The third are some other business essentials, just a couple things mentioned by our book. First, you want to develop a brand. The brand for your company, and then probably brand names for your products as well. Brand. You're going to have what's called digital collateral and brand collateral. You might want to take a look at your textbook. Those are two buzzwords, buzz phrases. You might want to take a look at your textbook and say, what are they? How do they differ? But your author's pretty clear. This digital collateral, this brand collateral, they're crucial for your business. They're crucial for your business. Basically, they tell your customers, amongst other things, your story, who you are. How are you going to solve their problems? They're going to identify you by that, brand recognition, etc. So this concept of your digital collateral, your brand collateral, your brand name, etc. that you have, author suggests is not a bad idea. If you don't have experience in marketing, maybe you want to hire someone who does, or retain somebody. Go out and hire somebody on a part-time basis, or a job-by-job basis or something, to help you with regard to marketing. So you could do the marketing inside your company, or maybe you want to hire somebody on the outside to help. But if you don't have customers, if you haven't done your proper marketing, etc., and don't know, things about your product and price and other things like that, you've got this wonderful corporation or whatever you just formed, and it has a tremendous name, and brand recognition is fine, etc. But if you don't have the customers, you're going to outbid us. So you want to be very careful about this concept of developing the brand that you have. Along this line, some other things your authors say, you want to develop a logo. Get something that's really neat and catchy. People remember pictures more than they remember names and other things like that. So they'll probably remember your logo more than they're going to remember your name. So be careful. Go out and develop a logo. You might want to hire a freelancer to do it. You might try to do it. Maybe you're artistic. That's great. Most of us aren't. And you might try to piece something together on the web. Be careful again about trademarks, because logos are trademarked as well. So you don't want to take somebody's logo. So you're not going to take Mickey Mouse or something like that with regard to it. And your logo, think about what colors you're going to be using, fonts, other visuals that you have. Again, people are going to remember the picture probably more so than they're going to remember the name. Another thought that your author has under other business essentials: get some business cards. I know in this day and age when we don't have paper things, right? Everything's electronic. You're going out and you're meeting people. Yeah, you can tell them your name and everything. What, they got to pull out their iPhone every time they meet somebody, they're writing something down? Heck no. But you can hand them a business card. And get a nice business card, the good weight and everything else like that, and it has your logo and your name, and watch out for colors and all that other stuff. So it's probably not a bad idea to go out and get some business cards. It'll help with regard to marketing and getting your name out. Another thing you want to do, of course, you want to get a web page. So, if you're really good at, HTML, etc., you can go out and you can design this yourself, but most people aren't. But there are lots of web hosting services and places where you can get a web page design. For example, I believe WordPress and GoDaddy actually have web hosting services you can get for free. And there are probably some others as well. And if not for free, low cost or whatever, you're definitely going to have to get a web page. And make sure, too, when you pick your web name, your domain name, etc., your URL, try to get something that's easy to remember and easy to type in. I've seen URLs and links. I mean, they're this long. Who can remember that? And also be careful with regard to whatever name you choose for the URL. Be careful. People might type it in wrong. Think about going to Dick's Sporting Goods, www.dickssportinggoods. A lot of people just write in www.dicks.com, and you're not going to get sporting goods when you type in that. So you want to be very careful about that. Another thing, just a few more things mentioned here by the author, and we'll conclude. Another thing, you need an email address, and don't use this email address at gmail.com. Blue Skies Corporation at gmail.com. People know that's cheap. People know you got it for free. Go out and actually pay for a real email address. Sometimes those web hosters will provide you with some either for free or for a low cost or whatever. But your email address should be your name at blueskies.com or whatever the name of your company is .com. Another thing you want to do, get a phone number for your business. Don't use your cell phone. Don't use your personal number. Get a special number for your business. And that might mean I got to go out and get a cell phone just for my business, or I have to go out and I have to get a business phone someplace, a business line or something like that. The reason you don't want to use your cell phone is you're going to have customers constantly calling you, and suppliers and potential suppliers, and everybody's going to be calling you, and they're not going to be calling you between 8 and 5 or whatever. They're going to be in the middle of the night, something you bought them that they bought from you doesn't work. They're going to be calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning on your cell phone. Do you want that? Of course not. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you get your own business number. The author does mention you can get business numbers for free or close to free using something called Google Voice, and also something your author mentions called Grasshopper. So go make sure you get a phone number for your business. Like with Google Voice, where you get a phone number and then you can have it call forwarded to your cell phone. But again, keep in mind that's still going to be ringing at 3 o'clock in the morning. But again, something you want to consider. And the final point that your author makes here, might be one of the most important, and that is social media. You know, you have to be on social media with whatever business that you start. And not only is this important for your current customers and your future customers, it's important just to show that you're a real company. Now, with regard to social media, you know there's dozens, hundreds, thousands of different places to go for social media. Do you go on all of them? Or do you pick and choose a couple? So you want to take a look and figure out what mix on social media. Am I just on one? Am I on a couple? Which couple, etc. Figure out the mix. You want to pick a mix that is going to be right and appropriate, not for you, but for your customers, potential customers. Your customers use this. You might not use it, but they might. So you want to make sure you're there. And keep in mind, too, with regard to social media, one of the big problems that a lot of small businesses have with it, oh, they know I've got to be on Instagram or I got to be on Facebook or whatever. Yeah, they got that. Okay, no problem. Understood that. But what they don't recall or keep in mind is as they're busy pulling their business together and they're working 24/7 and they're trying to get sales and hire people and get product and, you know, pay bills and all this other stuff, they have to constantly go back to their social media to update it. You want to keep the content fresh. You want to give a reason for people to go to that site on a regular basis. And keeping it updated, keeping it fresh, takes a long time. So a lot of people hire others to do that. You know, maybe they'll hire some students part-time or maybe on some sort of internship basis or something. There are companies that will do this for you, but you're going to have to keep your social media updated. Otherwise, people aren't going to be coming back to it. So that finishes up chapter 4. And it gives you an idea of some other things you need to associate yourself with getting this company started. You need the strategy, and you need a name, and you need legal structure, and you need the brand recognition, etc. And you need a phone number and business cards and website and social media. So that's what your author covered in this. I hope I've given you some tips, some realistic tips, some things that you should be doing with regard to your business that you're going to be starting in this class, as well as any business that you might be starting otherwise. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. But hopefully this has probably been somewhat tedious because it is fairly lengthy, but hopefully it's been somewhat helpful to you, giving you some real-world practical advice. Given that, I'm going to be closing off for the day. Hope you have a great day coming up, and thanks so much for your time. Bye-bye.